The case that we have, or the situation that we're faced with, is not, can we make people pay attention to AI? People are paying attention to AI. We don't need to make people worried about AI. People are worried about AI. But what we need to bring people to a place where they consider it of sufficient importance to outrank other things that they care about.
Welcome to For Humanity, an AI Risk podcast, episode number 82, How People Want to Be Talked to About AI Risk. I'm John Sherman, your host and the president of the AI Risk Network, where we are making AI extinction risk and AI harm approachable to everyone. No tech background required. I am excited for you to hear from today's guest. I met Philip Trippenbach at the AI Safety Summit in Paris I attended in late February. Philip is the strategy director at Seismic Foundation. And Seismic Foundation is something that I am deeply grateful that it exists. It's a group of expatriate advertising, marketing, and strategic communications professionals with badass resumes who are working to raise awareness around AI extinction risk. So sorely needed. I spent the first decade of my career as a journalist and the second 2 decades in advertising as an agency founder, creative director, and commercial director. If you've never worked in advertising, I promise you, you do not understand ad world. I came in from the outside 18 years ago, and I'm still blown away by how the advertising industry works. It has been a point of frustration for me in the past 2.5 years as I've been working to raise awareness around AI risk that the people running AI safety communications are not ad people or strategic communications people at all. They are physicists, cosmologists, and academic researchers generally. Do you know how much physics or cosmology or research you'd get done if you had ad people doing that work? Can you imagine the quality of the work? So why would you have public engagement and communication strategy done by researchers and academics? Something about tech people makes them believe they can do anything. The crown prince of tech, Elon Musk himself, thought he could run the government. But it only took a few weeks for even him to be chewed up and spat out, a total failure. Ad people should make ads. Physics and research people should do physics and research. Another layer on top of this is that the effective altruism and rationalism movements, two schools of thoughts at the origins of AI safety, just don't believe in advertising. They think it's impure, coercive, false. But if you don't believe in something, you are rarely any good at it. So, last week on the show, I debated Max Winga of Control AI about communication strategy around AI extinction risk. Max is a physicist who toes the traditional AI safety line. You must talk about extinction risk to make people understand extinction risk. Sounds reasonable enough, but Philip Trippenbach and his colleagues at Seismic Foundation have actually done research that strongly disagrees with this. Their research is overwhelming. Of all the AI risk harm topics, extinction risk is literally the last thing people want to talk about. Across all ages, genders, and political affiliations, extinction risk comes in dead last. So, check the show notes to the link to the paper. There's also a website I made with Perplexity Computer that shows off their research. I think this stuff is really important. Everyone needs to hear about this. So here's my interview with Philip Trippenbach. So, Philip Trippenbach, welcome to For Humanity. Thrilled to have you, man.
Thank you. It's cool to be here.
Yeah. So we met in Paris, and I was so glad to meet you because you are talking about, one of the things you talk about is something that I've been talking about for several months here and really been banging my head into for more than 2 years, which is how do we talk about extinction risk in a way that resonates with people, and how do we, when do we not? And so you've done some really, really interesting research into this. I want to get all into that. But first off, let's start off with a little sort of bio, because I think you're part of a group that's really interesting. One of my biggest pet peeves about the AI safety community is there is a noticeable lack of people with expertise in advertising and marketing, and actually just like a natural aversion to it.
Right.
So you come at it very differently from advertising and marketing. Tell me a little bit about who you are and what your group is and what you all are about.
Sure. Right. So I'm the strategy director for the Seismic Foundation. You can see us at seismic.org. And we're all like veteran operators from that community, from advertising, marketing, communications, and PR. So our founder, our CEO, Sander Volten, longtime operator in advertising, founded his own advertising agency. There's a lot of background there. The other members of the group, we come from that world. I myself, I used to be a journalist. So in a previous career, I spent about a decade as a journalist for the CBC in Canada, and then the BBC in the UK. So I worked on TV news, radio news, and then the documentaries, current affairs, and that.
Very cool.
Also moved into interactive. So because that was the early aughts, 2006, 2011. After a decade in journalism, I spent a decade, 12 years actually, in commercial strategic communications. So working for large PR companies. And there I was doing work for like large blue chip clients, right? So, multinational corporations were our clients. And we were there to make sure that they were appearing well, whatever well meant for them, right? So that could be about building an audience. It could be about launching a new product. Making sure that a narrative was shaped a particular way and not another way. And I have been with Seismic for the existence of the organization, which is 8 months old now. So we launched in May of 2020.
Super fascinating. And if we can for a moment, I want to talk a little bit about what the advertising community is like and is about, because I think it is probably as foreign to tech people as tech world would be to people on Mars or something like that. Like, because I got into ad world from news like you did, right? I was a journalist for 10 years on TV news, and then I got into advertising. It's like, whoa, this is a whole community. This is a whole vibe. This is a whole thing.
It really, it's a multi-billion-dollar global industry, right? So I think that one thing that certainly is important to note is that there's a lot of accumulated expertise there. It wouldn't be a multi-billion-dollar industry if there was no value there, right?
Yes.
So clearly, the lessons and the infrastructure, like there's a reason that large companies have large marketing budgets, right? And there's a reason that
it works. It works. They wouldn't be spending all the money if it didn't work.
It does something, yeah. So that's one thing. I think that one of the things that I found interesting in transitioning from journalism to PR or to strategic comms was that in a way, very little changed. In one way, and that way was that as a journalist, your job is to find out what's going on and then tell that story in a way that is maximally interesting. When you're in communications, when you're in strategic communications, that is also your job, is to find out what's going on inside a company and tell that story in a way that's maximally interesting. Often you are supplied the first part by a company that says, hey, we want to make a splash about this thing. Yeah. But very often you need to really interrogate that, and you need to say, well, actually, hang on, maybe the interesting thing in your company is this other thing. You say that you're launching the product because it's technically really good, but actually, let me tell you, there's an emotional aspect to this that you really ought to be highlighting.
Yeah. Compare advertising to tech world. Like, I don't know how much you do interface with tech world a lot. I'm sure. I think it must be said at the start that certainly as it applies to AI safety, there was a full EA thought that advertising is bad, marketing is bad, PR is bad, it is impure. All messages must be given in their full robustness and full purity, and you can't give a part of a message. And here are these very, I don't know what's the word, prudish. I don't like these words a mindset to communication that it should be done outside of advertising, marketing, and PR for some purity reason.
So, yeah, look, I've had multiple conversations at a lot of events and a lot of meetings sort of around this issue. And And I see where it comes from. I think that the thing that for me is the most important in all of this is effectiveness, right? The most important thing is that if we are communicating, the reason that we are communicating to people is to effect some sort of change, right? We want to change the way people think, and ultimately we want to change the way people act. So communications is effective to the extent to which it achieves that objective, right? Yeah. So if you are telling a message, it is because you want somebody to do something differently. They think something or are doing something that you believe not to be optimal, not to be good, and you want to improve that. So that means that your task needs to be to reach out to them in a manner that makes them change that behavior.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Let's
you're not being effective if you're not, if it, to the effective altruists out there, if you're not using the best tools, you're probably not being maximally effective.
Well, yeah, and I methods, right? Tools and methods, and I think let's do by analogy, a shoe brand. Okay, we'll take it to a product point of view before we get into the sort of systemic, civilizational issues. Okay,
yeah.
I've worked for shoe brand clients who have the technically most advanced R&D capabilities on the market as far as they're concerned, and their shoes are technically the best, right? Because of the materials used, right. But that's not what we talked about, because the runners that they're trying to target, that's not how they approach running. That's not how they approach shoes, right? What we started talking about for that client was the mental experience of running.
Yes.
Which was differentiating them from some other brands, right? For whom, it's about actually more fashion, or for whom it's actually about, a sort of gung-ho, you've got this kind of mentality. This shoe brand actually was trying to position it in a different place. It's true that they did have really technically advanced shoes, but if we led with that, then it wouldn't have created an effective sales campaign.
Totally. And it's like, so you have this box of shoes, the literal box, and you can decide which way you want to approach it, right? Like you can come in the front door, you can come in the side door, you can come in the back door, you can come up through the bottom. Like you're not restricted in how you approach talking about this thing.
And I think one thing that's really, really critical here is audience segmentation, right? So this is one thing that's really, really important from a marketing and communications and advertising point of view. And I think it's really, really important, for the audience of this podcast, right? Considering, right, your the origins of your efforts and sort of the nature of the conversations that is happening here, right? I think it's really important to realize that not everybody sees things the way that we do. And that's easy. I think that's easy to just say. But I think that probably you and I and most of the people listening have come into this issue in a particular way.
Yep.
But we are in a very small minority. Yep. And so reaching, right, members of the audience means segmenting messages in a different way, depending on who we're trying to reach when. And now we get into a real sophisticated kind of, because now this is about marketing orchestration. Yeah. Right? This is about, you can't say the same message to all the people all the time. If nothing else, because sometimes people have 5 seconds, or sometimes you've managed to interest them enough that now you can talk to them for an hour. And those are very different. That's even if you're talking to the same audience, right? But if you're talking to an audience that might be interested in the issue for a different reason, or might not be interested in the issue at all yet, and you're trying to get them interested in the issue, well, then you've really got to start thinking about what's your way in. And the front door versus side door kind of analogy really works.
Yes. And may I say that, like, this challenge that we are talking about, obviously we are gravely concerned about AI killing us all, AI extinction risk. This thing we're talking about, how to make other people know that, how to make other people understand that. This is the AI safety challenge, full stop, in 2026. Like, this is more important than research. This is more important than, public policy right now. Like, it starts with the people knowing, then the people get agitated, take it to the politicians, take it to their neighbors, take it to them financially. And I think most organizations in AI safety understand this at this point. Like, most of the orgs in San Francisco that I talk to, most of the orgs out there have reduced their hope in politics and put all their hope in communications. And so there's a bunch of San Francisco tech dudes and orgs trying to figure out this thing we're talking about right now. And unfortunately, I don't think they are currently apprised of the lessons that we're going to get into. but they're desperately trying to figure this out. So, maybe this effort will be helpful in sort of trying to redirect that effort.
Well, okay. Yeah. I mean, I hope so. I think, look, here's what I'd say to that is, look, I'm here because my journey for being a part of this community started with the idea of existential risk, of catastrophic risk. That's what's got me on this path.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. A long time ago.
Love that, brother. Love that. Me too.
I was still working in a PR company in 2014 when I read Superintelligence, right?
Yeah.
And at the time I was like, wow,
way ahead of me. Yeah.
Freaky, but oh well, I don't work in computer science. There's nothing I can do about it. That's what I thought, 12 years ago.
Someone will figure this out.
And then it wasn't until 2022 that I started realizing wait a minute, actually there's a lot of organizations you've just mentioned, right? There's this dawning realization that actually communications is an important part of this. That's a whole separate story. But what I just want to say about the existential risk focus is that is absolutely important, but getting good policy enacted is the solution, right? Ultimately, we need to activate the public.
Yeah.
The reason that we need to activate the public is that political science, the history shows us that unless there is sustained and visible public demand for a policy policy tends to get made behind closed doors.
Oh yeah, and if made at all, they're just, my audience is well familiar. I've been in congressional offices and literally been told we're not hearing from our constituents about this. What are you talking?
Which is
good luck,
right? So, which is exactly the point. And I mean, look, the lack of policy is also a policy, right? So the last figure that I saw was that $400,000 a day was being spent on lobbying efforts in Washington by large tech companies, and that is anti. I'm oversimplifying here, but a lot of that is anti-regulatory, right? A lot of that is, right? And the situation that we're in now is that the lack of public demand for policies to effectively regulate AI is quite convenient for companies that don't want those regulations, right?
Absolutely,
so
absolutely.
I think that we need to activate the public, but my question is how we do that. And the research that we've done shows that if we are leading with the existential risk message, that may not be the most effective way of doing that. That's the evidence that we have.
And this is highly controversial. What you just said, Philip, what you just said is very controversial. I literally had a 40-minute debate in Europe when I was there at PausCon about this with Max Winga of Control AI. It is a fascinating area of conversation. So let's get into it. You did some in-depth research. Talk sort of maybe about the research project, because people will want to know about that, and then let's get into what you found.
Okay. So I'm gonna everything that I'm about to tell you about is available in document form. So first I'm going to tell you about our report. So we did a big public survey last summer, which is called On the Razor's Edge, and if you go to seismic.org, you can download the full report.
We'll put links to everything in the show notes.
Yeah, great. Okay, cool. And then based on that, we did a big piece of research and and some live message testing with an American audience to validate further findings of the report. So so let me take you through it. So first question: do we need to engage the public? And I've already talked about this, but yes, we do, because if we don't engage the public, policy gets made behind closed doors. The pressure right now,
if at all. Yeah.
Well, the pressure right now is for no restrictions, right? Or as little as possible.
Yeah.
So we need to counter that. Now, when it comes to the public, we found, there's good news and there's bad news. So the good news, and this has been confirmed not just from our findings, but from many findings, is that the public, broadly speaking, is worried about AI, right? So you could go out on the street after listening to this in any city where you happen to find yourself, and most polling from most countries is broadly consistent. The majorities of people are worried about AI. They want AI to be regulated. They're concerned about the impact on their jobs and on children and frankly, on a lot of things. So what our research found was that people believe that AI will make worse almost everything that they care about, right? So we asked people about 25 different issues, right? And we said, do you think, Healthcare. Do you think AI is going to make healthcare better or worse? Crime. Do you think AI is going to make crime better or worse? And so on and so forth down 25.
Wow.
Ironically, health is actually the only area of the 25 that we polled that people believe AI will make better.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think they're right. I think that's probably right.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Like, what else hit us though is that, so people are broadly worried, but that's not the full story, because they're worried, but they don't actually care. So what I mean by that is that the salience is really low. So we tracked, as I said, 25 issues. AI ranks 24th out of those 25 in terms of how high a priority it is.
Wow.
According
What's
to
number one? What's number one or number two?
War and terrorism in our survey. Yeah.
Okay.
Now that varies, right? And there's other surveys that are good.
Wow, that's super interesting because you always hear about 70-80% support, 70-80% of people are concerned about AI, but what you're saying is like they are concerned about it, but in terms of the priority rank, it's really low.
Well, so the thing is that what really matters, the priority ranking really matters because look, it's a midterm election year in the US, for example, right? If you go out into the street and you don't say, are you worried about AI? But instead you say, hey, the midterms are on us. What are the top 5 things that we should be talking about?
Yeah.
Those are the things that are going to sway voters. Those are the things that are going to sway activity.
Yeah. And I'm curious about this because I don't know if you sort of count this as a subset of AI, and I'm sure you didn't break it out as a thing, but I would have been curious to see like where data centers come in on that 1 through 25.
That wasn't on our survey. And actually, at the time, this is an issue that's really exploded recently.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, the public opinion is moving so fast in this, right? So, I mean, just yesterday I was looking at Google Trends data on searches for AI and jobs, right? So Google Trends is an interesting kind of proxy for like what people are interested in, right?
Yeah.
The search volume on AI and jobs has increased tenfold between 2023 and between 2024 and 2025.
Yeah.
And it's on track to go even higher in 2026.
I can't imagine how high it's going to go. I'm disturbed by how high it's going to go.
Right. But and look, that's just one data point, right? That's Google Trends research, but that tells us it's an interesting proxy for what people are interested in and what they care about, right?
Yeah.
But just back to this salience point that it is true, right? And we see it a lot that people broadly support measures to that we would consider, responsible AI policies, right? So restrictions and they're worried about the jobs, that's all true. But unless salience is high, people don't tend to act on it.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really critical point, right? So the case that we have, or the situation that we're faced with, is not can we make people pay attention to AI? People are paying attention to AI. We don't need to make people worried about AI. People are worried about AI. But what we need to bring people to a place where they consider it of sufficient importance to outrank other things that they care about.
Yeah,
high up in the political salience.
Totally. I'm really curious about this because I think this to me is a huge part of it. It is there's a lack of agency. People feel powerless, and so as much as we don't need to persuade them, they already feel they're uneasy about it. They're worried about their job. They may not have thought about extinction risk, but they feel like these are the 7 most powerful companies in the world, and they're spending all this money, and we've never even been able to stop them from doing anything with my kids' social media. And how do I have any agency to affect this thing? I think that's a huge part of the challenge here.
I agree with you. But, one thing that I find heartening is that when there is an opportunity to respond, people have taken it. And we saw that, for example, last week or a couple of weeks ago in the Anthropic and Pentagon dispute, right? Because actually what we saw loads of people canceling their ChatGPT subscriptions and subscribing to Anthropic instead.
Yes.
Right.
And I love that. I love so I need to layer in here. I don't know if you've heard me talk about it, but I don't think that laws and treaties alone are going to get us there. I think we need the public activated to create financial friction for these companies as well, through data centers, through lawsuits, through data center opposition, through lawsuits, through all this stuff. So this all plays into this world where we are slowing them down.
I think absolutely there's a lot of tools in the toolbox, and absolutely, consumer behavior, which this is an example of, is absolutely one of them. But I think for the purposes of what we're talking about here, the really interesting part for me is that often, as you just said, it isn't clear what I can do about it. But here, there was this case where people are like, wait a minute, I can just cancel my subscriction. That's a thing I can do.
Yes,
and a lot of people did that.
Right. And it's an immediate win, right? It's like instant gratification. Like I did it. I took action. Right. That's what that is. There's so few points in this battle where you feel like I took a successful action. I punched and it hit and
right.
It's hard to find.
So then now we come back to the salience point, which is, okay, so we know that people are worried, but they're not taking any action. Right. So we, in order to get to the level of public interest that I think we need in order to create the demand for the policies that we need people to, care enough to be calling their representatives or, actually talking about it with their coworkers or their bosses or, joining town halls and asking questions about this, right? There's a whole range of like civil society actions that are the way that, a democratic society deals with this kind of issue, right? We need to motivate people to take those.
Yeah.
And this is where sort of like the deep communications theory comes in, is we need to do that by engaging with the motivations that people already have.
Yes. So yes.
For me, this is the part of the argument that for me is important. Is look, we did a lot of research on existential risk and how to communicate about it, right? And if you go to Google Trends, again, right, as an interesting proxy for what people are looking at, and you can get an analysis of what people are searching for. Go to the US or go to Worldwide Trends and do a search last 5 years for AI extinction, right? You could even pause the podcast and do it right now, right? And what you'll see is basically nothing until May of 2023, when there is the Center for AI Safety's 22-word statement, right? Bam, huge spike. And then basically nothing until August of last year. And then we have actually quite a lot of activity, which has sustained until now. And of course, that is corresponding to the launch of If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies by Eliezer Yudkowsky and Nate Suarez.
Okay.
Right. So that has had a big effect, right? We can say it. Just looking at that one.
You can see those 2 points, the letter and the book on the chart. Boom.
Letter is, so the search string for this is AI extinction, right? You look for that. Okay. But then we can compare it with other things, right? So if you then search for AI suicide, much, much higher search volumes. Search for AI and children, much, much higher search volumes. AI and jobs, much, much higher search volumes. And the growth rate on those other three is really fast.
When I was 15 years old, I decided I wanted to be a TV news reporter. There are 4 major national awards a TV news reporter can win: the Peabody, the DuPont Columbia, the National Emmy, and the National Edward R. Murrow Award. Before I was 33 years old, I had won all 4 as a local news reporter investigating Chesapeake Bay polluters.
Reporter John Sherman will accept the Peabody.
John Sherman.
But I left news in 2010 when the internet was really starting to radically change the news business. Now, algorithms dictate much of what we see, and in turn, much of what we think. That's why I am so excited today to talk to you about Ground News, the founding sponsor of the AI Risk Network and For Humanity, an AI Risk podcast. I first heard about Ground News when I noticed them sponsoring many of my favorite podcasts, but true confession, I never used the service until they approached me about sponsoring this podcast. So I tried it, and truly, I have been blown away. It is a fundamentally different way to consume news. Okay, next true confession. Before Ground News, I used to use Twitter to get all of my news from. My thought process was like, well, I'm reading the major publications and I'm reading the major writers, so, how bad could it be? It was really bad, like way worse than I thought. If you see anything often enough, it becomes normal, but these algorithms kind of lull you to sleep, and you lose your perspective. And I realized that was exactly what was happening to me. Ground News pulled back the curtain for me. Even for me, with 12 years experience working at news, it revealed things not just about the news itself, but about the way it was being covered that I wasn't really able to see. Sensationalism and bias were sneaking past my radar, and I didn't even know it. Ground News lets me compare headlines and know going in the biases of the publication, so before I ever read a word of the article, I understand the frame around it much better. So as an example, let's take the historic defeat of big tech in the US Senate when the proposed 10-year state AI law moratorium was crushed by a vote of 99-1 at 4 a.m. Ground News gives me 270 articles in one place, but then it gives me a distilled bias comparison. For me, I spend a ton of my time trying to think about how to effectively communicate with the general public about AI extinction risk. So this bias comparison shows me how the left was framing it up around environmental impacts, where the right was framing it around states' rights. That is really informative to me as I try to form my opinions and make decisions about how I'm going to communicate about AI extinction risk with the general public going forward. I also absolutely love this feature called Blind Spot. It shows you what stories are being covered super heavily by one side. These are stories in your algorithm you just might miss because you don't know they're out there. So, if you want to support the AI Risk Network, there is nothing more powerful you can do in terms of showing your support than subscribing to Ground News and using our custom code. There's a QR code right here. There's the URL right here. It's ground.news/AI risk. They will know everyone who's using that came from right here. It's incredibly important that we ring that bell a lot and get a lot of subscribers into Ground News. So please go sign up, do it. You'll be glad you did. Ground News and the AI Risk Network want to form a long-term relationship and partnership, but that depends on one thing: our viewers actually subscribing to Ground News. So I need you to go in to your phone, to your laptop, to wherever, ground.news/AI risk. Sign up. You'll be able to support the AI Risk Network tremendously and get the perspective on your news that you have been lacking. It is so important. Please do it. All right, now back to the show.
So what's wild is that while the total number of people that is searching for AI extinction has risen substantially, and that's correlated with the launch of Yudkowsky and Suarez's book, the proportion of people who are searching on AI-related issues who are interested in AI extinction has decreased. Because so many more people are interested in all of the other issues.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, so there's a little... Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Right. So many more people are searching on AI extinction. Many more people are interested in AI extinction. But if you're looking at the total, and those are just four search strings, right? Like there are many others. And like, I'm not pretending that this is a comprehensive analysis. I'm just saying this is an indicator, right? It's a way of kind of getting into the situation, right?
Yeah.
And the volume of people that is interested in AI issues other than is increasing so fast that it's eclipsing the growth, right? The proportion of people that's interested in AI extinction is actually lower now than it was. Yeah. So in 2023, if we're looking at those four search strings, in 2023, 1 out of every 9 searches was on the AI extinction. In 2025, 1 out of every 67 searches was on AI extinction.
Wow. Sliding away. Going the wrong way.
Here we have, something good and something bad, right? We have something good, which is people are getting interested in the issue of AI and how it affects their lives. Now, the bad part, I don't know if it's bad, but it's challenging. The question is, well, okay, hang on. How can we turn this into some mobilization if we're trying, if we're focused on catastrophic risk, if we're focused on extinction risk?
Yes. So I'm so fascinated by all of this, Philip. This is incredible. And so to me, all arrows sort of point in the same direction because my theory of change for extinction risk is generalized friction, that the only winning state is delay.
Okay.
Like what is pause? Delay. What is What is the state where they are slowing down to the point where we have a chance to do the research that has a chance to maybe work? Like if we can, buy ourselves 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 extra years to work on the important safety technical challenges, maybe we have a chance. I think that's the only way. So it's like, how do we build in those delays? It's about creating friction, and everything you're talking about, the jobs, the data centers, the impact on children, all of these things, I think can create friction in the overall enterprise that leads to a safer world. So I think that everything is going the same way.
Well, yeah, I think that the way that I would put it is this, is that, artificial intelligence is going to change human civilization, business, communities, family life in many, 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 many ways. And the more powerful a technology is, the more risks it has. And we need to mitigate all of them, right? Like, so yes. The likes of Yoshua Bengio and Jeffrey Hinton, have been telling us for years, hey, there is this chance that this technology could actually be catastrophic for civilization. And that's one thing that we absolutely, obviously need to be, wary of and trying to mitigate. And there's also a whole bunch of other things, like what is going to happen when massive job disruption hits? What is going to happen to the nature of democracy? What is going to happen to the way that we communicate to each other across social media and in families? Like, they're all important. And I think that, that obviously if you adopt a utilitarian calculus, one of these massively outweighs the other because you're weighing like the future of the entire light cone. And I get that. But again, we're talking about how do we mobilize people?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Can we take a little bit of a detour? I want to take a slight detour here, Phil, for 1 second and talk about the difference between AI harm and AI ethics. Because I was at the Paris summit. I was really taken aback by the focus on AI ethics, and, sat through a session on hotel room pricing ethics, with AI, which, when we have extinction risk, it was ridiculous. But AI harm, to me, is like job loss. It is harm to children. It is data centers that are blighting our communities, taking our energy, riding up our power bills. Like all of these things are harm. And so I think harm, where people are being hurt right now, is a very fruitful area for us to communicate about. And I think ethics is sort of a road to nowhere, to me, a little bit. It's good work. It needs to be done. I'm not saying that I want all these unethical and biased things happening. It's just in a world where my timeline is we have 2 or 3 years to do the important things that need to be done, and we're not going to be here. I find AI harm to be a much more powerful, fruitful area for communication than AI ethics. You have any thoughts about that?
I mean, look, I see the distinction in your characterization. I'm not sure that I agree, because I'll tell you how I see it. One of the things that impressed me so much in Paris was how actually multifarious the interest in AI had become. And you had people who were, not AI people who were at the International Association for Safe and Ethical AI conference, right? You had people who were economists. You had people who were sociologists. You had people who were in it from, for a variety of different reasons, and who had realized that the development of this technology is going to change their discipline. And I think that there's strength in that diversity. Ultimately, right, what we need the kind of policies that we need to get to a good future to be politically viable.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And for those policies to be politically viable, we need lots of people from lots of different sides of society all agreeing and pushing for this.
Yes. Yes. But I would say this, I do wish that if you have all these economists and these interesting people gathered together at the Safe and Ethical AI conference, that if they go home and they don't get the extinction case at all, they walk in, they're not understanding the extinction case. They spend 3 days there and they go home and they didn't hear anything about extinction.
Okay, but let's dive into the extinction case, because we did some research on this, right? So I think one of the things that's really important to acknowledge, I think, to realize, is that those of us who have come into this community, this issue, through extinction risk are unusual people in a very specific way. So we were curious, right? The spur for this research was this idea of, well, wait a minute. very high profile scientists and thinkers have been making the extinction risk case for years, right? So we did this research last year in 2025, right?
Yeah.
So the idea of AI extinction was not new, right?
Yeah.
I mean, 2023, right? There was lots of focus on it, right?
Yeah.
So by that point, right, we'd had 2 years of warnings from very highly placed people who know what they're talking about, right? I mentioned, Bengio and Hinton, like the inventors of the technology.
Yeah, like from the moment Hinton left, that should have been the moment. Like everyone should have been like, okay.
Right. Yeah, okay. Not landing, right? Like the degree, right, of interest. Yeah. Like I mentioned, right? If we're using just that one indicator of the Google searches as a proxy for human interest, right? It wasn't really happening. Why? Okay. Well, we found that there are actually some aspects of human psychology that make that message particularly difficult to absorb. Right. And this is all like detailed at length.
I love this because we've known this as someone who talks to people about this, thinks about it. Like we've known there's this challenge to it, but to scientifically pick it apart, I think is fascinating. Please continue.
Right. So there's 3 aspects of human psychology, and everything that I'm about to tell you is like backed up by lots of like independent experimental validation, verification, right? But there's 3 aspects of human psychology that make it difficult for most people to engage with the X-risk message. The first one is what's called mortality avoidance or terror management theory. And this is the idea that when people are confronted with a message that reminds them of their own mortality, they are likely to reject the message and to cling more closely to whatever worldview and values they had before they were exposed to it. And you can obviously see how this is adaptive in a sort of like, evolutionary psychology kind of way, right? We're constantly surrounded by things that might kill us, right? If you spend your whole time going like, oh my gosh, you're not going to be effective, right?
Yeah.
In your community, right? As a hunter-gatherer or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
That hasn't changed, right? The hardware and the wetware is still the same, right? So most people have this, this reaction. And I think it's instructive. I mean, I guess those of us who are in this community don't have that or have it at a reduced degree.
Something's wrong with us, Philip? I feel there's something.
I don't know if wrong, but we're different.
Right? Something's right with us? Right.
Yeah, we're more able to stare into the abyss, I guess.
Yes,
right?
Totally. It's being able to look over the edge of the cliff and be like, okay, I could see it. What are we going to do about it?
Right. Whereas most people kind of turn around and go the other way. Mentally.
Yeah. And I know you've experienced this with people you try to convince about it, where it's like you do the argument, they're on board for, 7/8 of the argument. And then you get to the end and it's kind of like, so this is really crazy. We need to do something about this. And they're just kind of like, yeah, no, I'm not, didn't sail not
however,
made.
Right. So however people, react, that's what the experimental like psychology research shows us, right? Which, like, by the way, for me, I think that this is like why tobacco companies remain profitable, right? It's like we have literally known for generations that stuff's going to give you cancer.
Wow.
Still do it.
And people are just like, mortality, blah, 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 blah. I don't care.
Right. Okay. Well, right. So that's one thing, right? Okay. So mortality avoidance or terror management theory is one psychological feature. The second one is exponential growth bias. So in order to have an appreciation of the kind of timelines that you were mentioning earlier, John, right? You mentioned like 2 or 3 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Most people, right? They're like, oh, look, it can make a dog picture, but the dog actually has bunny ears. Isn't that silly? Right? Like that's where most people are right now, right?
Yeah.
That's because most people, just most humans, don't have a good grasp of how exponential growth works. And so most people don't really get the idea that through recursive self-improvement, we could be very rapidly in an intelligence explosion scenario. Right. So, and again, like this is not original research, right? But this is us doing a literature review of the published science, right? But there's this famous thought experiment, which is you've got a pond and there's a lily pad on the pond. And every day the surface of the pond that's covered with lily pads will double. Okay. And on day 30, the pond will be fully covered. On which day will the pond be half covered? So if you ask most people that, they say day 15. But the correct answer, of course, is day 29, right? Because the area is doubling every day. So it has to be half full by day 29 so that it's full on day 30, right? Right. So this this so this is called exponential growth bias. And it's such a strong effect that in our research, we even came across, now I'm going to butcher this because I can't remember which one it was, but it was an Ivy League college. So it was Yale or MIT or, like top flight. This was an experiment that was run on grad students at that college. And as part of the experimental protocol, the students were informed and reminded of exponential growth bias immediately before proceeding to the experiment, and they still got it wrong. Right? So
it's that hardwired. It's just baked into us.
Right? It's difficulty, right? So this is how you end up with, and this wasn't so long ago, right? But this is how you end up going from, there's some kind of weird flu in China to, oh my God, there's no more toilet paper, right? Like, remember that? We just, it blew, we didn't get it, right? We couldn't understand how it had happened so fast. Right.
Yeah.
So those are right. So mortality avoidance is one. Exponential growth bias is another. And the third one is what's called the self-reference effect. And so those of us who are in the marketing and communications and advertising area know this one really well, which is that you can't really get somebody to engage with a message unless it connects to some of their personal lived experience.
Sure.
And here, when we're talking about, catastrophic existential risk effects from AI, you start talking about something like, an AI replicating data centers until they boil off the ocean.
There is no shared lived experience. It doesn't exist.
It's just not, it's totally outside the realm of human experience. And a little digression, if I may, but often the regulation of atomic weapons is mentioned, right, as a success of successful management of existential risk, right? Which is, we've had a couple of close calls, but, there is a global governance regime in place and it works sort of, right? Or at least we're still here.
We've left our way to where we are. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, but I think it's important, specifically with connection to this self-reference effect, to think about how this global regime of nuclear weapons control arose, right? So we're talking about legislative initiatives, international treaties that were kicked off in the 50s and the 60s. Who did that? The Second World War was in living memory.
Yeah.
Any politician who was from Europe had lived personal experience of what it was like to be in a city that had been destroyed from the air.
Yeah.
Everybody had lost people, right? Even, in America and in Canada, right, where I'm from, our cities had not been destroyed, but loads of our people had been deployed abroad.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're a GI and you've been deployed to, post-war Berlin or whatever, and you've had, orphaned children begging you for chocolate in the ruins of a destroyed city, and you go back and you get into politics and somebody says, hey, should we stop nuclear weapons? You're like, wait a minute. I know what it's like to be in a bombed out city. Yes, let's do that. Yeah.
I often say that this is like trying to get nuclear collaboration without Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's like if we'd never seen it, could we be addressing it the way we are? I think the answer is sadly probably no. Right? Like, could you get? We all know pandemic was like a word on the news, like a Scrabble word. Before it was like, no, you can't leave your house and you have to wear a mask and you. Right. Like we're so bad at understanding things before they actually smack us in the face.
Right. So here we, in my head, I get back to the public interest point, which is these three aspects of psychology are just human, right? And then we did a message testing experiment on that, right? And so, again, the full results are published online.
Yeah.
Where we tested messages in 6 different themes in a bunch of different ways with a representative sample of 1,063 Americans. And the overwhelming results were that messages about existential risk are the least activating of all of the 6 themes that we tested for all demographic groups, all ages, all voting constituencies. So the question is not, can you get people to accept the reality of existential risk? Clearly you can. Here we all are, right? Listening to this, right? But the question is, it's going to take effort. It's going to take time. It's going to take resources to activate the kind of the public policy demand that we need. And how can we do that the most effectively with our effort and with our time?
Yeah. And so I'm called back to my debate with Max in Brussels, and I'm like, I think what he would say, or what he did say, is like, if you believe extinction risk is the most important thing, that's what you should be talking about all the time, because there are other people that can talk about the other risks, and there's only so many people that know about extinction risk, and so that's what we should be talking about.
Sure. And I think that that's right. I mean, I go back to the point about audience segmentation, right? There is a certain group of people for whom this is the most important message. And, many of them are listening to this, right? But there's a much larger group of people.
Yes.
Who have difficulty engaging with this message.
Yes.
And my question is not about those of us who are, on the, like, saying, yes, we need to do something about catastrophic risk. My question is, if we need to build a mass movement in favor of, like, responsible AI policy, how do we do that effectively? And I think the answer is we talk to people about, like, the work theme cluster and the family theme cluster, because our research has shown that people are engaging with these two areas, and it is a way to get people clamoring to their leaders and their representatives for some type of meaningful change.
Wow. Philip, I've never heard it broken into those two buckets, family and work. That is so clean. That is so simple. I love that. I absolutely love that. That's great. I think that's a very simple way to think about it.
Those are where our research shows that those two clusters are really where people are mobilized. The family cluster is about specifically, protecting children is right now the lead discussion of that, and actually that's reflected in the legislative agenda, because across multiple U.S. states recently there have been a number of bills, some of them passed, some of them not, but on a legislative level there's discussion around this, right? Also in this cluster is the broader mental health issue, not specifically focused on children, right? But also a general question of the integrity of human relationships and how AI might affect families. On the work cluster, yes, people are interested in their jobs, obviously, right? People want to make sure that they have a livelihood and that they can afford to, live and eat and bring their families up in the world, right? And have a good life. What I found really interesting about this cluster when we were doing our focus groups was that actually a lot of the things that people were telling us, a lot of the things that we were hearing, they weren't really just about the money. They weren't really just about the jobs. It was actually about dignity and actually about fairness. So we had one of our respondents who was from the U.S., Arizona, appeared to be well into her career, probably close to retirement age, was a counselor, had never heard of UBI, and was told about UBI during the focus group by another member. And what struck me about her response was that she got angry. She heard, right, that this was a possible way, of mitigating AI effects on jobs. Yeah. And said, what? I've put 30 years into my career and all of that education and all of that experience, just so I can get some money from the government? And it's not about the practical response, right? Because, of course, with UBI, you could keep counseling people, right? Of course, if you wanted to, right? I think what's important is the emotional reality there. So yes. What was interesting in the jobs part is that actually, when you get right down to it, people don't really see AI as a thing in and of itself, but they perceive it more as an instantiation or an aspect of a system that is already unfair, that they think is already unfair.
And if I may take a little bit of a detour to just beat on these AI labs a little bit, I often say that the good case future is so under-discussed and so unpalatable unto itself that, if it goes well, according to them, and there are no jobs and somehow everybody gets UBI and we're not all in the streets punching each other because there's not enough resources. We actually live in abundance, and everybody's in their space cave and wherever they're doing, but nobody needs to work, and it works. This just dismissal of what is human fulfillment and human dignity as it relates to work, and has been built into us for generations. Just this absolute lack of recognizing that as a significant issue really is upsetting, because it's there's so many cases in the middle that are not the best case, that have really bad things that we can see. But even the good case, the it goes well case and its abundance case does not account for this.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, I'm not a philosopher, so I think that the continued human fulfillment and meaningful life in the absence of meaningful work, I mean, that's a big question. But what I will say is this, that I find it really interesting that the two thinkers in the U.S. who have risen to prominence on this question recently is Bernie Sanders and Steve Bannon.
Yes.
And
Philip,
when would you ever have those two people in the same room on anything, right? But let's look at why. And I think that the reason why is because, again, oversimplifying here, but Bernie and Bannon, what they have in common is that they have built a political career out of standing up for ordinary people who have been, in their own eyes, trampled on by the system.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I'm grossly oversimplifying, paraphrasing here,
sure,
right?
Sure.
But
I'm sure that's how they would both speak about themselves. They would say, this is what has been my focus. Yeah, for sure.
Right. And note that those two are some of the loudest voices when it comes to AI, specifically in the context of what we're talking about now, right? So meaningful work, human dignity, right? That's what it's about. And I think that the reason that is resonating is because it plugs into something that even a 6-year-old can understand. It's not fair. And when you can convince people, when you can make them realize that something is not fair, that they have been wronged in that way, that is really powerful. That brings people into the streets.
Wow.
We've seen it, right?
Yeah.
We've seen it.
Yeah.
Many times. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Right. So if we're in this future where AI has all kinds of risks, in order to mitigate those risks, we need some pretty serious policy change. We're not going to get that policy change unless those in power realize that there is powerful demand for this policy change, because otherwise those lobbying efforts are going to be perfect, right? They're going to just sail through with nothing, right?
Yes.
If we need to build that public demand, we need to mobilize people. And if we're going to mobilize people, we need to do it effectively, right? We can't just be banging our hands on a closed door. You were talking about side doors, before, right? Look, there's a side door to the castle. All right. If we storm the front gates, they're locked and they're going to shoot us down. Right.
Yes.
But this idea of it being not fair, people are already reacting to that. And the fact that Bernie and Bannon have caught so much attention on it is a proof of that.
Yes. I mean, honestly, I'm not going to get political, but the president's message of the United States right now is all about unfairness. And I think his movement is, a lot motivated by this message of it's not fair. And that has been a tremendously effective political force in American politics for the last decade.
And not just in the U.S. either. I mean, I think that those same forces are at work everywhere. I lived in the UK during the Brexit vote, and it was the same. It was, expressed in different ways, right?
Yeah,
but the vibe
you're getting screwed over by this thing. It's not fair. You're being taken advantage of. That's a super powerful, motivating message.
Yeah, and again, right? It comes from that you feel it in your gut, right? That it's not fair, right? Those of us who have kids, right? Like even a small child's, right? It's like, what? Yeah. But he got 2 scoops of ice cream, right?
Right. And super powerful. It's like there's fairness sort of generically, and then there's fairness applied to your family. Your family is being wronged. Your family is being treated unfairly. Your kids are being treated unfairly. And
it's personal.
It's personal, and they are. And,
Yeah.
this is the robbing of our children's future. Our kids are being treated tremendously unfairly by these AI companies, tremendously unfairly.
So, and again, like I'm not here to comment on like, economics or whatever, but I can definitely tell you that if we're talking about motivating people, right, getting to this level of emotional resonance, that is how you build effective campaigns. And that's where we are in such a difficult position when it comes to the existential risk argument, because it is by very definition impersonal, right? It's about as impersonal as you can get, right? Like a godlike super intelligence that doesn't even care about people boiling off the oceans because it just wants to pave the world in data centers.
Right? Like,
the whole point is that there's nothing human about that.
Generic, like we are all future paperclips in the making, like couldn't be more dehumanizing, sort of like less personal, more like at arm's length.
Right. But then tell me that my kid is going to be affected without my consent.
Yes.
Right. So
and now I'm standing out of my seat. Now I'm ready to like do something.
Yes. So we have this line that we use a lot, which is that AI shouldn't just be something that happens to you. And I think that is, and a lot of people nod along with that, right? Because they're hearing, okay.
Yes. And this gets to the agency question. This is that sentence right there is all about agency, because it is happening to all of us without our consent. And most people feel there's nothing they can do.
Well, yes. I mean, to some extent. Yes.
That's their feeling. I don't think they're right. That like we're the idea of this show, the idea of everything, the reasons we were in Paris and the work we do is because we believe the opposite, but a lot of people don't.
Yeah, and look, that particular problem, the fact that people feel powerless, is not something that's limited to AI, right? Like all sort of major issues have the same, right? So the environmental movement, climate change, social justice movement, like all of them have that barrier. A lot of people feel, but there's nothing that I can do, right?
Yeah.
But again, right, the example of the Pentagon versus Anthropic and people canceling their ChatGPT subscriptions as a result shows that if you give people something, concrete that they can do.
Yes.
Actually, people like to take that opportunity.
Yes. Okay. All right. So let's keep going with the research. So unfairness is a huge motivator. And the idea of talking about extinction risk across all different demographics, all different ages, all different political persuasions, extinction risk coming in last.
It was ranked as the least activating of the six categories,
and by a lot, right? Like it's just the dog. It's clearly the least effective argument on the table.
Well, based on that sample, right? So I really want to extend and deepen this research. We did do, we have a statistically relevant result. We did 1,000 people. It's nationally representatives, but there's a lot of different ways that you can slice this, and it's a complex issue, and its interactions with, like everything else that people are thinking about, are multifarious and complex, right? So like there's a lot more research that we could do here. But within the confines of our experimental design, we tested six topics in 3 modes, right? So X risk, children, mental health, inequality, jobs, and WMDs. So those are the six topics. And we gave people a choice of like a random selection of messages on one of those topics, expressed in one of 3 modes. So there was one which was just a straight up statement of the facts. There was another one which is a social proof way, where like most people think this, that kind of thing. And the third one was specifically designed to be emotional, right? So there was a story involved, or it was designed to be quite most poignant.
Okay.
Yeah, and across all 3 of the modes, existential risk was the least. People rated that as the least relatable and the least likely to drive them to action. And I'm having my little Max Wing on my shoulder. And Max would be
he'd be like, it doesn't matter. We have to talk to them about this because we have so little time, and this is the only thing that matters, or something. And I don't know, I'm doing a horrible job representing his position, but
I just think that my answer to that is that, I mean, first of all, I'm not saying don't talk about it, right? I want to go back to the point that I made about segmentation, right? Again, the fact that we are all here proves the fact that some people do engage on this topic, and that's good,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
the objective then becomes, how can you find those people and expose them to the message?
Right.
That's
Right.
good, right?
And it's like there's a sequencing here, right? It's like there should be a journey of learning or persuasion that we put people on. And so it's like, if you get someone to the threshold and you realize, oh, they're having that mortality aversion, they're having that lack of understanding exponential risk thing that is so human happening in them, what do I do then? And I think the problem is the historic AI safety position would be, you just keep going with extinction risk and you just pummel them with it until they give up. And this is like, no, if it's not working, there are other paths that will work.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, because now we're into like, tactical communication design of how do you actually create an artifact that convinces people, an individual text or an individual video. And like, there are too many permutations to discuss that effectively here. But I think that the bigger point that is important is the point about the broad range of risks and mitigation strategies that is necessary for the future to go well. And the fact that the absolute importance of creating a base of civil society interest and action and demand for policies that will make this go well. And we need to do that through appeal to a whole range of different topics that do interest people already.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
I see how, from a narrow utilitarian calculus, something like jobs might seem like a small problem when compared with existential risk, but it is a big problem now, and it's perceived as such by many people who are very worried about it.
Yeah.
Right? So there is a route to action. There is a route to a better future through that expressed interest. And it also means that we can activate people for policies that are hopefully supportive of their human dignity and their livelihoods and everything that is germane to the current generation, right?
Yeah. And what about this sort of historic AI safety mindset of, we only talk about extinction risk because the remedies for the other risks are different? I have a little bit of a different perspective on this, because my current remedy status is just friction. And so I think all of this does create friction, and therefore it is remedy in itself. But what is your thought on that sort of historic view?
I think it should be clear by now that I think that AI is a very complex issue and there's a lot of angles to it. Nevertheless, I do think that there are some policies which are broadly good. And let's not underestimate the importance of creating the validity and expectation of a regulation complex, right? So like, if we look at the environment by analogy, right, there's no like one AI law, one environment law, right? Because there's a lot of issues, right? There's like air quality in your street, right? How much green space do you have in your town? And then we get all the way up to, fuel efficiency, right? And
energy carbon policy, credits, the whole thing. Yeah.
There's lots of different policies at lots of different levels, right? But what we have in the environmental debate is a widespread recognition that this is something that reasonable leaders are expected to engage with and litigate and legislate on, right? So even if your environmental policy is drill baby drill, you're still legitimizing the debate by like participating in it, right? Like obviously, like joking there, but you see what I mean, right? There's an expectation that people are engaging in positions of power are engaging with it. We don't have that expectation for AI yet. And we need to make it, and we need to make it quickly. It's a midterm year. 2028 elections are coming. France has elections next year, right? Like, this issue is not going to become less important, right? And so we need to wake people up. So that's one thing, right? So that the public expectation of a regulatory complex that is addressing this issue is a really important thing. Tristan Harris has called this being part of society's immune system against this. And that's a relevant action that you can take, right? Is if you are plugged into this, discussing this as something serious with your colleagues, family members, friends, is being a part of that. So that's one thing, right?
Yeah.
Then let's look at some narrow policies. Okay. One of the things that people are most have like people's attention has been seized most by has been the tragic spate of AI-driven suicides that we've seen.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And the resulting lawsuits.
Horrific.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's focus just on that issue.
Yes.
Okay. Let's say we're not interested in anything else. Okay. What do we actually need in terms of policy in order to comprehensively mitigate the risk of AI-driven suicide? Okay. Well, we need mandatory pre-deployment safety testing. We can't just take their word for it. So we need third-party verification of that testing. We need adverse event reporting capability. We need transparency requirements, and we probably need a litigation framework that addresses these things.
100%. 100,000%.
Right. So like these policies, by the way, I'm sure that you're nodding because you're like, well, yeah, those also apply to mitigating a bunch of other risks, right?
Yes. Right. It's a straight line from there to all the risks. You can apply that framework to every risk.
You actually can, right? And look, I'm not saying that if we've solved this, we've solved it all, because we haven't.
Yeah.
But what it does is it changes the discussion, right? Because it'll put a big tech company into the position of wanting to say, okay, cool, we did it, we solved it, and we're like, no, we need to. That was a start. Now we need to build on that, right? Yeah. But the point is that the policies and the expectations are there, and they can be built upon. But there's a momentum at that stage. Yeah.
And I think with the suicides, this to me is one of the most fruitful areas for this, engaging people about this, engaging parents about this, and then turning that argument into X risk. And here's how I would do it. It's like, Mom, you're concerned. You've read, the transcripts of the chats from the rain case in California. Absolutely horrific. You're concerned that this chatbot in your kid's phone that you see him using all the time, that they're going to conspire with it to kill themselves. We cannot reliably give you an AI model that will not do that. I'm sorry, Mom, but that is just not on the menu right now. And the reason is this. The models that we are making are not aligned with human values. And we have no idea how to make them aligned with human values. So while you might think there's some guy writing code in San Francisco and he can just say, no suicide, click, and we turned off the suicide switch, that's actually not how these systems work. They're not aligned with our values. And that's actually why most experts are really concerned they're just going to kill us all. So it's like a short road and a straight line from teen suicide risk to X risk. And I feel like we could, maybe not as fast as the 10 seconds I just did it in there, but like you can take a parent and walk them from point A to point B.
Look, maybe you could. And I think that would depend a lot on, that individual conversation. Right. So, and look, individual conversations can be extremely convincing. But I think they need, I think that any messaging like that needs to be part of a larger complex. Right. I think that what we need to be doing is we need to be saying, look, this is a powerful technology. And like powerful technologies, with power comes risk, right? All powerful technologies need to be managed effectively. And this technology has some specific types of risk that don't pertain to others. One of them is just the speed of its improvement and development, which means that we need to be extra careful because it could change things really fast. And the other is the way that it just underpins, as a general purpose technology, it underpins so many parts of our current society and could change them in ways that are unpredictable that, we really need policymaker focus on this. And again, we need that salience. Because unless there's a public expectation for lawmakers, people need to be going to their congressional offices thinking, wow, like that town hall, everybody was shouting at me about AI. I got to get some policies, I got to get some people in on this.
Yeah.
Right? That's where we need to be. Right.
Yeah.
And we're not there yet.
Yeah, totally. And I You probably have a little bit of different sense of it over there in Europe like you are, but I feel like the data centers are the flashpoint that AI safety needs to hitch its wagon to and ride, because it is a rocket ship, taking off. And it hits on all levels. It's literally like you are going to blight our community by putting in this horrific box that pollutes our community in a bunch of different ways. And it is literally an incinerator to our jobs and potentially the world's largest coffin. Like it is both things. It is a mass grave. It is a grave of jobs, and it's right next to your community. Oh, and by the way, you have to pay for it in your power bill. Like, what could be a shittier proposition?
And look, what I will say about that is this, because I think a lot of people would take, I mean, you've had some really poetic ways of putting that, world's largest coffin, for example. I think a lot of people would take issue to that. But you know what? Nobody can deny the fact that for the local community, it's a huge deal, because again, it's personal.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And I think that the level of engagement and why this is so effective. I mean, Bernie Sanders has been talking a lot about this recently, right?
Yes.
Like last week.
National moratorium on data center construction.
Right. And the reason that it's resonating with people is that here you have, it's not actually a national issue, right? What it is it's like 10,000 local issues.
Yeah.
And that magnifies into a national issue. But,
totally. And it's in every community,
Right. But if you live in one place, you're not incensed about data centers popping up somewhere else.
Totally.
Your problem is the fact that used to be a football field, and now there's a data center over there, and I can't hear.
Totally.
Because all of the fans
here's another way I think this thing can work. So I had a Zoom with a viewer this week, a woman named Kelly, who's a mom in Alabama, who is like literally just the most regular person in the world who is fully found out about X risk and is very concerned about it. And, she wants to get active and do something. And one of the things we talked about is like, find the local data center opposition group. Like, they're having meetings that, they're having in-person meetings where you can go and you can engage in a process where there's going to be a tangible result at the end of it. Like, you can actually, there's going to be 5 meetings about it. And then the council's going to decide whether they approve the data center. And like, so you can go to the meeting, object, go to the meeting and like block the thing. And you're like, I did something. And I truly believe that every block data center project is AI safety. It is literally friction in the machine. It's slowing down the enterprise.
I think that there's lots of again, this cuts into so many parts of our life and society, and that there are, because of that, there are many possible responses, right? Like in our focus groups, one of the things that I found interesting was that people tended to conflate social media and AI. And it's not that surprising if you look at who's, which companies are doing the social media, which companies are doing the AI, right? And like the people running both were at the front row of the inauguration, right? Like it's all connected.
Totally.
So it's like fuzzy. People relate to it like most on a vibe level, but it's like, ooh, this thing, what's in here? Like it's damaged, right? I think that's kind of good in a way, in the sense that we've come to a place, I think, where the harms of social media are now well understood.
Yes.
And so actually the idea, right? So you have like a lot of like parents groups organizing to like not have, smartphones for their kids and stuff like that. Right. And that's another micro action, right? It takes me back to the point that, again, the Tristan Harris term, right? This is all being part of society's collective immune system, right? It's creating the expectation that we need to deal with this as a, like, all of us. That is something that affects us all, right? That it shouldn't just be something that happens to us.
Yes. And it's something that you can do something about. I think that's such a critical...
And there's no one thing. Yeah, right. There's no one thing. There are lots of things.
Yeah. So back to advertising and marketing and the lack of embrace, understanding, acceptance of that field in AI safety. It is, it is something that they have pushed away for the longest time. So, Philip, if you had $100 million to spend and do an ad campaign.
Oh no!
And I know that's a heater to throw with you with no preparation, but you know, a true ad guy can spend any amount of money that the client has. So you know,
yes.
Big
a true ad guy might not be able to spend it live, but okay, yeah, but sure,
yeah. You know, what do you think? You know, if we said, you know, in the next 3 months, next 6 months, we want to ring the bell as loud as we can, using all of your advertising, marketing, PR, strategic savvy, what would you do?
Okay. So hypothetically, with $100 million, we're gonna do this in a phased approach, because I think, first of all, you said that the AI policy community, you know, has been like avoiding advertising, marketing, and communication for a long time. I think that has changed a lot just over the course of the past couple of years. So, I mean, a lot of organizations are ramping up.
I have to put a pin in there. They are, but they're doing it wrong. They are doing it.
They're doing it wrong.
So, I don't mean to offend anybody here. My dear friends at AI Safety in San Francisco, but like, there is a mindset of a tech leader, and this goes to the AI safety leaders as well. That is, I can do anything. I run tech, so I can do anything. That's why Elon thought he could go and run the government. Took him 9 weeks to get spit up and, you know, chewed up and spit back out as a total failure at it, right? But they believe that you can run a tech company, you can do absolutely anything. So there is a lot of effort in communications right now coming from AI safety, but it is all being directed by people in San Francisco who speak San Franciscoese, who, quite honestly, many of them are on the neurodivergent spectrum, and really process human emotion differently than the people they are trying to connect with. And I don't mean that to be harsh, but that is a real fact of this thing. So it is, and then it is this EA rationalist Berkeley mindset where, you know, the argument must be pure and complete and blah, blah, blah. Right. And it's like, no, actually you can take a quarter of the argument, make a hell of an ad and make a real difference. You know, and do it in a way that genuinely addresses human emotion. So it is, I was talking about this with a couple of people in Brussels. It's like, who are in this community. It's like you have a group of people who do not process emotion in the way that their target population does. And this creates a huge disconnect in what they're making and what the public needs. So I don't know what you want to do with that.
Well, so, I mean, look, I think that this is part of what I was addressing earlier when we were talking about the psychological barriers that stop most people from engaging with the X risk argument, right? I just think it's really important that we are evidence driven and that we have a mature, segmented marketing and communications strategy. Yeah. So that is the spirit in which I want to answer your $100 million question. Because if I had $100 million right now, I wouldn't spend it immediately. I think that we need to segment it into a couple of phases. So the first phase is, look, we're in an election year. It's a midterm election year. This is a really interesting opportunity, right? And
a lot of pressure points. Yeah.
Well, what we have is a chance in November to run a lot of experiments on what actually makes people change their minds in a live election situation, right? Not a lot, I think, is going to public opinion and sort of the national conversation changes, not that quickly. So we're probably going to be in a broadly similar place now and in November. So what this offers us is the opportunity to first find out what it actually mobilizes people. So the first thing that we need is more research on a specific question, right? Because we already know we have lots of polling about what people are worried about and their attitude towards AI. That's not the question. The question is specifically, how do we get somebody to march? How do we get somebody to sign a petition, to go to a town hall to demand some change, right? And that is a simple question, but answering it requires really good intelligence on emotional activation pathways segmented by audience, right? Because the answer to that question is going to be different for a tech worker from San Francisco, and it's going to be different from an Uber driver from Tennessee or a stay-at-home dad in New York City or whatever. I don't know, right? Like all of those, right? So the answer to this question needs to be expressed in an extremely sophisticated piece of intelligence, which is, all right, for every type of person, I now know which emotional levers are the right ones to press.
Yeah.
Then you deploy a test campaign on a national level, or in specific, in your hypothetical circumstance, we have quite a large budget, so we can probably deploy quite a large test campaign. But that test campaign is still going to be a fraction of that.
Yeah.
Right. And then we're going to have not only the first part, which is good intelligence on how to mobilize, people in every single congressional district of every type. Right.
Yeah.
Because people who voted Trump for the last election in this congressional district are not going to be activated the same way as people who voted, right? Like that kind of thing. Right.
Yeah.
We test it. Then we go live during an actual election campaign, because there are already some people who are running, right, partly on AI platforms. Right, New York, Michigan, there's a few people who are already engaging with it. Some with data centers, some with other issues. Okay, well, so then we have live evidence of how that works in a live capacity, and then I would spend the remaining 95 million on activating those people in the right way. And each of the so this is not one campaign.
So that is a 25 different styles of communication, pieces of communication, all sort. It is the way things are done now. And this is a little thing in my head. Your approach is much smarter, and it's the way it would be done. I tend to I sometimes want to go back to like 1980, and I want to there's 6 words in text that if the typography is right and it's the text is white on a black background, and you could put it on billboards and bus stops and everything, and these 6 words on this thing would stop the world and change the world in this one singular ad, and it would be the most this sort of like platinum bullet advertising theory. Yours is much more contemporary, which is like it's a million different things.
Well, I think that there's still room within that for big messages that a lot of people see. So don't get me wrong on that, right? And I think that there's also value in creating something that is so big that everybody's seen it. Right?
Sure,
so
like shared language about this, or just one shared idea about it would be powerful.
Yeah, I mean, look, people still buy Super Bowl ads. Like the point of buying a Super Bowl ad is not so that people see it during the Super Bowl. Partly it's that, but it's also the fact that it proves that you're the kind of company that can buy a Super Bowl ad. And more than anything else, they know that that's a talking point, right? So it's a shared piece of cultural reference, which is also important. But I guess the nationally unifying or large unifying moments like that are few and far between. And we mostly live in, algorithmically defined information bubbles now. So
yes,
you need quite a sophisticated marketing orchestration plan in order to reach all of your different segmented audiences with messages that are going to sway them. There's no one big one.
Yeah.
So in that, just to close this out, I think in that area, there are people who are going to be mobilized on children. There are people who are going to be mobilized on jobs. There are people who are going to be mobilized on X risk, on issue, D, E, F, right? And the job is to create a campaign that in aggregate builds the public demand that we need.
I love it. So what is next for you guys? You have a group of advertising, marketing, badass dudes and maybe some women. I don't know what the group is, but and so I absolutely love this. This is like something I've been looking for at AI Safety the whole damn time. What is next for you guys? How can we get you more empowered? What are you looking for to play a bigger role in this thing? Because I think you all are exactly the people we need with more power, money, role.
That's nice to hear. I think that, look, we exist to address the salience problem. The whole purpose of our organization is to raise the salience of AI. And we want to do that in a targeted fashion, right? Like everybody else, we have limited, I wish that we had the kind of budget that you just put to me in the in that hypothetical. But even if we had that, we would have to do this in a very targeted fashion, right? And the thing that's critical to us is that we are not the policy experts. We work with people who are, right? So we are working with a lot of organizations who are activist organizations, lobbying organizations, people who are involved in the policy space much more directly. And we our whole modus operandi is close partnership with them to make sure that at moments where public demand is necessary, we can make that manifest in partnership with them, right? And there's way too much going on for us to track it all individually, right? I mean, even if we were just concerned with the United States, there's so many legislative initiatives on a state and federal level that it's impossible for, or it's a full-time job for an organization to track them. So we're working with organizations across the US and in other countries to try and focus on, well, where do we need public engagement now? So that's what's next for us, is to continue that and scale that up and to continue working and trying to affect change in places where that public mobilization is going to make a difference as soon as possible.
I love it. I a lot of times like to end the show with sort of like what gives you hope. But I'm going to tell you, before I ask you that, I'm going to tell you, you give me hope, man. Like really, like having you all involved in this thing is very heartening, because I've been in advertising for 18 years and got into AI safety 3 years ago and was like, what do you guys mean you're going to do this without advertising and marketing and PR? Like you're going to convince the whole world about something by declining to use the traditional means of achieving that. And in its place, you have nothing. We're just going to put stuff on YouTube and cross our fingers. And if we get enough on YouTube, we're going to change the world. And no, YouTube's very powerful, but what you're talking about is something entirely different.
Yeah, I think. Well, first of all, thank you. That's nice to hear. I think that what gives me hope is that I was talking about at the beginning of our conversation about Google Trends as one window into what people are seeing, right? And the level of public interest in these issues is exploding. Right? People are cottoning on to this. And while they're cottoning on to, the issues, maybe they're not focusing on X risk. Some people are, but as I mentioned, people are focusing on this issue and its multifarious complexity. That is good. And what I think that gives me a lot of hope also is that I'm seeing that they're doing this because they are realizing that the technology is affecting, or could very soon affect, their lives and their families in very personal ways. And when you see something like the response that Bernie Sanders and Steve Bannon have gotten to their contributions on this topic, when you see people reacting with those really powerful motivations, like, this is not fair, people start standing up.
Yeah.
And we are seeing, people who are running for office or about to run for office starting to incorporate this into their platforms because they are seeing the way the wind is blowing, and they realize that the members of the public are quite rightly waking up and saying, hey, you need to start thinking about how you're going to manage this well for us, because that's your job. You're a leader. You're supposed to manage this. So I think that gives me hope.
Yeah. I'm going to do it. Philip, I'm going to switch my argument I'm going to go to this isn't fair. I'm going to try like the fair. I'm going to try to lead with fairness for the next couple of weeks.
Right. See how that works.
And see how it goes. Because quite candidly, we're all going to die. Doesn't work that great. So, this isn't fair seems like a much more promising starting point.
It's very activating.
Yeah, and that is what we need. We need people to get active. Awesome, man. Philip, such a pleasure to meet you, and I'm thrilled about what you all are doing. So I all the speed and power and luck that you can get as you continue in your effort, I wish you. And let's stay in touch. I want to hear about what you guys are doing, and couldn't be more excited about it.
Well, great. It's a pleasure.
Awesome.
Thanks very much.
So what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Check out that research and let me know in the comments. Are we allowed to talk about the other risks? Yes, we are. It'll probably work a lot better. AI safety does not need to persuade people. 70 to 80% of the public does not want superintelligent AI to be made. Polling is clear. We need to make them feel like they have agency to change our course. That is our task. And it starts with meeting them where they're at, hearing about real AI harm people are enduring right now and will endure in the near future. Lost jobs, harm to teens, children, and families, data center blight, pollution, and negative economic impact, senior scams. This is the way. We hear them. Then we start talking about extinction. This is the way. All right. Hey, one more thing. I have a really ambitious plan to take the AI Risk Network on the road in 2026 to places large and small where AI harm is real. Been trying to get this off the ground for months. If you believe in what we're doing here, your donations are critical to keeping this going and getting my plan off the ground. Link in the show notes to donate. Please do if you can. Okay, my friends, please remember, AI risk is not someone else's problem. It is yours and it is mine, and there's no way on earth we're going to let a few thousand people wipe the other 8 billion of us off the face of the earth. No way. For humanity, I'm John Sherman. I'll see you real soon.